I've got a couple of stories for you, and then maybe a song. But when I heard that the theme was going to be out on a limb, I took it very literally at first, because I remember this story that happened to me when I was 9 years old. And I lived, this was back when I was just outside of Detroit, Michigan. I lived on Cumberland Road. Does anybody know Cumberland Road? No, of course you don't. It's a little road in the middle of nowhere. But the thing that, I don't know why, every time I say Cumberland Road, I remember that there's that thing, did you hear, it was going around on the internet like years ago, when the internet was still very young and new. And it was like one of the first viral things, I think, and it was about how to know what your porn name would be. And you take the name of your first pet and the road where you lived, when it first lived. And so my porn star name is Chico Cumberland. I like that. Chico. You can call me Chico. Chico Cumberland. So I was living on Cumberland Road, not knowing that it would be my name as my alias later on in life. But I was living on Cumberland Road, and I was 9 years old, and I was over at Karen and Colin's house, and Karen and Colin were brother and sister, and their folks were away that afternoon. And so that was cool. The folks were away, and one of them said, "Let's go up on the roof of the garage." And I was like, "We're not supposed to go on the roof of the garage." And they said, "I know. Parents aren't here. Let's go up on the roof." Okay, how do we do this? Well, there's a tree that's growing next to the garage. And so you climb up the tree, and there's this branch that reaches out to the roof of the garage. And on the other side of the garage, there's another tree. And so the idea is, you climb up. So the first, Karen climbs up the tree, and she goes out on the limb. She goes from the limb onto the roof, and she walks across the roof and goes to the other tree and goes down. I'm like, cool. All right, I can do this. I think Colin went next, and then it was my turn, so I was the last one to do this, and that was good. So I climb up the tree. That's fine, because I climbed up trees before. And I climbed out onto the limb, and I felt everything was going fine. And then I got on the roof, and the roof was one of those ones that was really very steeply pitched, right? And it was, I determined, it was shingle, shingles, which is that it's kind of a tarred, it's kind of like heavy duty sandpaper that's been, shingles. Do you know what shingles are? No, we don't. Oh, well, they're shingles.
We do now.
Oh, thank you, Phil. You cleared that right up. And so I started walking along this, and I don't know, but about halfway, I totally lost my nerve. And I realized that what I was doing, see, this is a mistake. I realized that what I was doing could not be done. And you shouldn't realize that when you're doing it. If you're going to have that realization, have it beforehand and just don't do it. Don't realize that when you're in the middle of it. So I had the realization that this just cannot be done in the middle of it. And then it was like, okay, what do? I sat down. All right? And so I have, my feet are like, legs are like this on either side of the thing. And I'm not going to actually do it because I'll probably split my pants now. But I'm kind of like, the roof is there, and I'm like sitting down on the roof. And I'm riding the roof. But I was not a confident cowboy. I was just like, oh yeah, all right. And then they're like, Phil, you come on, you gotta go, gotta get off the roof. And I'm like, no, I can't get off the roof. I can't stand up. Phil, you gotta stand up. I cannot stand up. I'm not standing up. Okay. Slide down, go down, climb down. Why don't you climb down? You get over here and you just kind of climb down the pitch of the roof. You can do that. I'm like, okay, that sounds good, because I don't have to stand up. I can do that. So I'm gonna swing my leg over So the roof is going like this now. And I slide myself down like about this far. And then it's time, like, I can't go any further because my arms are a given length. And they go, okay, Phil, well now you gotta let go. And I was like, I mean, I didn't know this is what I was saying, because I didn't know this language, but if I had known the language, I would have said, no fucking way am I letting go of this roof. But I just said, That's how it translates into adult speak. But my hands were there, and it was just like, Phil, you gotta let go, you gotta come down. No, I'm not. It's just, no. So about 40 minutes later, I was listening up there for 40 minutes, then they're like, Phil, Mom's coming home, get off the roof. You have to get off the roof now. We're all gonna get in trouble. I can't. Mom comes home, they get the ladder out, the ladder comes up, their mom is sitting at the top of the ladder. I don't know, maybe they called, there were other parents around, there were adults, everybody was down there, Phil, get off the roof, let go, no. And then finally, it was like, more than an hour and a half had passed. And it was just like, God damn. And so finally I had to let go of this, and I slid down as slowly as I could. But because it's a shingled roof, as I slid down, my shirt got pulled up. And then I was sliding down in my stomach against this basically industrial grade sandpaper on the side of this roof. And so when I finally did get down and I got off the roof and everything, and I just had it, I was like abrasions all over my stomach and it just was very, very painful. And the lesson I learned is it's okay to go out on the limb, but don't go on the roof. Sometimes it's best to stay there. Another time I went out on the limb, one of the riskiest things I think I ever did was when and you can tell me if you agree with this, was when I started writing poetry in high school. It's like, this is the time when you decide who's cool and who's not cool, and I decided to write some poetry. But the reason I started writing, and this changed my whole life, this did. So I was in German class. I took German, and German class was 6th period, which was just after lunch. And it was in this tiny, tiny room with no windows, and it was always too hot, And so you're in there studying German, and I remember looking through my notebook to study for tests, and my sentences would be like, wo ist das L? Ich habe eine, because I kept falling asleep. And my sentences would go, I'd study, and these scribble lines would go off, and Herr Stein, who was the teacher, Mr. Stone, he would literally chuck erasers and chalk at students to wake them up, because everybody was falling asleep in there. But one day I wrote this poem. In the corner of my notebook because I just couldn't deal with it. I did not want to be here. I just thought, this is terrible. So I wrote this poem, and I will share it with you. So this was the first poem that I ever wrote without it being like a haiku for school. So I wrote this. Oh, that I might leave this place, to fly, to be free. But no, I cannot. Teenage angst. Why? My life, my destiny, not shaped by myself. I must. Perhaps. Oh, she likes the perhaps at the end. That was it. Anyway. So embarrassing. So I wrote this, but it was, so this is the poem. All right, so I read this thing. Sitting behind me was Bill LaPlante. You know Bill? No. Bill LaPlante was on the football team. Bill LaPlante was very big. Big Bill LaPlante. And Bill saw that I was writing something in the corner of my notebook. And he reached around and grabbed my notebook and said, "What are you writing?" And took the notebook. And I just thought, oh my God, I'm dead. I'm going to go out on the playground at recess and it's over. It's over. My life is over. And then Bill puts his hand on my shoulder and I thought, oh, here we go. Notebook back in front of me. And at the top of the notebook are 5 stars. And Bill goes, "Nice poem. I want another one tomorrow." Thank you, Bill. So every day in German class, I had to write a poem for Bill and get it graded. And I'd write something and Bill would give it back and there'd be like, 3 stars and he's like, "You can do better, man." What do you like? Do you want sarcasm? What do you want? Anyway, so that was how I started writing poetry. I thought, after that, I'll do you a poem. I'll do you a poem. I'll share a poem with you. And this poem I wrote which is about kind of being out on a limb and taking risks and kind of the way things just kind of snowball sometimes. But I had this house outside in the hills in Australia, in Melbourne, the hills of Melbourne, and it was a little hills cottage. And it was on a hill, and so because it was in the hills. And the floor is flat and the hill slopes down and the house rests on these stumps, they're called. It's kind of like a house on stilts, these stumps. And one day I was looking around it and I noticed that at the base of one of the stumps, it looked like a little bit of rot was coming into the stump. It was rotting a little bit. And I thought, oh, that can't be a good thing. Now, I've never owned a house. I don't know anything about all this stuff. So my approach was, well, get a screwdriver and just start pounding the stump and seeing how it goes. So I do this. So I start like jabbing the stump, and it goes, and half the stump falls away. And I see that inside the stump, white ant, termites. And they're climbing their way up, but they haven't gotten up into the house yet. It's like, oh God, that was really, what do I do? I don't know. Of course, I didn't look up. What they say to do is if you find, don't do anything to them. And you get the experts in. So I start digging. I dig around the base of the stump. And as I dig around the base of the stump, and all of a sudden, it's kind of hard dirt, and then my shovel just kind of goes, choom. And I heard a splash. What? Digging, and there's water around the base of the stump. I'm like, well, that's why it's rotting. And I learned later that termites always need to have water, right? They need to have water wherever they live. So I start digging away, and as I'm digging, it's not just a little bit of water, it's this like whole small little thing, like whole small little big thing. It's about this big sort of cavern full of water. I'm like, what the hell is this? Yabbies. Anybody know what yabbies are? No. Yes, thank you, my Australians.
You were right, mate?
Yes. Oh, I was not right. So yabbies they look like sort of like crayfish, but or shrimp, but these were land yabbies. So they live in the hills and they build little sort of reservoirs of water from the underground tributaries, and you never see them usually. You know, every once in a while you might see one that was out and it gets stuck in the sun and kind of dries up kind of thing, or a cat finds it, but you rarely ever see them. And so we had this, it was like all these little, the yabbies had made this reservoir of water under the house, and the termites were using the water to help them live. I don't know why they need it, but they do. And then they were coming into my stomach. What do? Stop the water from coming under the house. That's the plan. So on the upside of the house, there was this garden retaining wall. Right? It's this garden wall. And I found out that what you're supposed to do is you dig an Aggie drain, which is when you dig a drain, sort of, you dig down and you make this sort of cavern and you fill it with gravel, and at the bottom there's a little hose with holes in it. The water that's coming down inside the hill, it hits that, it flows down into your little pipe and goes around the house. You have to build an Aggie drain. So I'm digging this trench. So I'm digging this 1 foot deep trench. So there's a wall of rocks, big wall of boulders. And I'm digging a 1 meter deep trench in front of them. Everything's fine. Until it rained. I had just finished digging the trench. And it starts raining. And it rains and it rains and it rains. And the whole retaining wall slid into the trench. And so there were all these like massive boulders that fell into this trench that I had dug. And so it ended up taking something that should have been a very easy job, and it made it this, it just took weeks and weeks and weeks to get these big boulders down from. And I wrote this about that. Take this off, baby. You're standing in the mirror with a razor for a comb. There's a knock on your life and you shout, "Nobody's home." The fly is in the ointment and the check ain't in the mail. It's like you're stuck on the Titanic with a thimble for a pail. And not a single body loves you, and the sky is as black as a crow in a dark room with pitch on his back. And the answers hide like fugitives, and somewhere something's gotta give. You'd like to stretch your spine like a lifeline piece of twine and just snip. And you want to cut rid from the chase. Cut rid from the chase. You're burning like a coal seam with 1,000,000 years to go. You've got your hand on the buzzer shouting, "I don't know." The Bible's on the burner and the devil's in the vein. You swore you'd never tell a soul, but now you're mumbling again. To mobs of empty no-ones, and the elevator's stuck between the basement of dank worry and the roof of fallen luck. And insanity stole your slippers and keeps waking in your whispers. And you're dangling from a rope, wove from navel lint and hope, and you just want to snip and cut rid from the chase. Cut rid from the chase. Thank you. All right. Thank you, thank you. Cool. All right, just going to finish with a quick song. And this is just, again, sort of about, I don't know, taking risks, continuing to take risks despite everything that's happened in the past. So not listening to, I don't know, the fact that things haven't worked so far doesn't mean you should stop trying. So this is a bit about down and out, being down and out, and it's a bit over the top. It's kind of, we'll call it a country song. called I Just Maybe Might. That sure thing down in Tucson never finished. Hard Fist Harry went down in the first. The only time I make some sort of progress is when my bad luck goes from bad to worse. When I call heads, it's tails that comes up shining. When I call tails, it's heads that's staring back. I never hit the bullseye, hell sometimes I miss the wall. And that boomerang ain't never coming back. Well, I know I never ever pick a winner. I know I've drawn the short straw all my life. I know I never ever get it right. But this time I just maybe might. This time I just maybe might. This time I just maybe might. Well, I know I never ever get it right. This time I just maybe might. When there's no way I can lose, that's when I beat the odds. In a one-horse race, I swear that horse will die. When I finally find a parking space, it's between a rock and a hard place. I can lose a job before I even apply. Lady Luck gave me a dodgy number. I end up paying even when it's free. And my checkout line's the slow one, even when there is no one else there but me. Well, I know I never ever pick a winner. I know I've drawn the short straw all my life. I know I never ever get it right. But this time I just maybe might. This time I just maybe might. This time I just maybe might. Well, I know I never get it right. But this time I just maybe might. Oh, this time I just maybe might. This time, just maybe. Thank you. What's